Now I should be here. You should be able to hear me now. Oh, OBS. OBS, for goodness sake. Yes, I'm here. Hello, I am here. You can now hear me. It's OBS doing the thing where I should watch the doodad in front of me going back and forth because that's the point of it. But the point the point is the point is that the OBS. Why do you reset that? I just have to select my audio output every time. Anyway, basically the point being, RMT, shout out to RMT, TSSA, fix your stuff. Anyway, enough of me waffling again. God, that took long enough, didn't it? Oh dear. Let me tell you about what we're doing tonight. It's episode 158, and we're talking about the fact that there is no such thing as the last mile problem. We've had I have discussions all the time where people refer to the last mile problem, and every time that I have that discussion, I am made angry again. Yes, I think I was on time. People are saying I wasn't on time. I think I was on time. I was slightly late, maybe like a minute late, because I was handing my wife, who is currently feeding our little one, some water so that she doesn't die. So it was a noble and necessary delay. It is the last day of the UCU strike today, Detour. Actually, I've been wearing my, well, it's not mine, it's Dina's. I've been wearing Dina's UCU hat around town a lot, because it's pink and it's quite fun, but also solidarity to everyone in the UCU. So this is not the last of the Pat Leave pre-records. No, this is live with a human in it. Anyway, right, enough of this waffle. It's Class 158. It's episode 158, so we have to talk about the Class 158 very briefly. Except we don't, because we had an episode about the 158, didn't we? Which is like episode 2. With the benefit of hindsight, I'd have put the thumbnail of the episode in, but I haven't. So there's a nice Class 158 in Regional Railways livery. These originally weren't going to be regional railways; they were provincial, which was a kind of a pre-regional railways sectoral brand. So anyway, yeah, there we are. So there we are, Class 158. It's a lovely train. And without further ado, let's get on with this rubbish. Welcome to tonight's Rail Matter. As the Institute, I nearly said the Express printer fades away. No, that was what we had earlier. As the Institute 225 fades away, there's not going to be any news today, but we are going to have a look at the COVID stats, because we haven't for a while. COVID stats. So we'll start with the overall view again. I've updated the overall view. I think I did this already, haven't I, with all of you lot? Hello, Martha. Last week's episode was ace. Very cool to have you in the chat, as ever. The usual caveats about this data is 28-day rolling average. I think we did that last time. We have cycling at the top here, with the usual sort of surge in sort of summertime that we've seen over the 2020 and 2022. We're yet to see what happens with that here. But we also, so these are all a bit lower because they're rolling averages. They're a bit lower than the peaks that you get, which I'll show you when I zoom into just 2023. But you can see we had this tremendous drop in ridership across the board, actually, over winter, which is interesting. I can't exactly explain that because that's a uniform drop across the board. What made everyone do that? Is it cost of living crisis making people not travel as much? Is it a consequence of the fact that we can work from home and everyone's like, oh, it's dark and it's January, I'm just going to work from home more? I don't know what that what accounts for that, but it's the dip is. I mean, it will be Christmas actually because these markers are the start of the month. So that probably is. That'll be December. That'll be January. That'll be February. That'll be March. Then April, then May, then June. Yeah, so you're right. Actually, I'm speaking rubbish. It's the kind of the holiday drop, but there are fewer, so people aren't traveling around as much for their holidays as they did in the past, which is certainly domestically, which is interesting. They are a bit easier. So there have been dips, similar dips in previous years, but never quite as steep. But that suggests to me quite a short wavelength. Anyway, basically, let's jump forwards to. So that's the overall sitch. Let's jump forwards to this year, which is a bit scriggly scraggly at the moment. These are the actual numbers, not the rolling average numbers. And you can see, well, it's just a bit of a mess. Key thing, though, is up here that you can see rail. Actually, let me clear my scribbles. Rail is... you know what else I can do? Oh, no, I won't do it yet. I'll bring my little face up in a sec. Rail shooting up above the 100% mark nationally. The national average shooting up above the 100% mark. Bus services also doing the same thing. Very irritatingly, there are several large gaps in rail data that I cannot fully explain, and that are, for some reason, the DfT has chosen to exclude that data, which aggravates the heck out of me. I don't fully understand why that is. And the start of the year is an example of a gap in that data. There's a gap in this data here. Actually, I think on this I've got fill the gaps in on Excel, so it's actually filling the gap. I should undo that so we can see where there are data gaps. But there are some annoying data gaps that I don't fully understand. So annoying data gaps. But critically, okay, bus services drop. Bus services kind of still generally climbing, although this is a big old messy scribble, so it's harder to spot. Road usage not recovering as much, to the point where rail usage has been over road usage for, what will that be, the first time throughout the entire pandemic. And this is relative, of course, this is not in absolute terms. Maybe a lot of sicknesses due to staff illness. It could have been. I mean, it could have been another blinking COVID wave, a mini wave that no one's talked about. It could be. It's not strike related, I don't think. Deirdre, you're right. They should at least explain why the data is missing, which they haven't. Normally there's a little note, and I do not believe that they have added a little note explaining why the data is missing. I'll click on the where data source, quality, rail passenger numbers, data source methodology. There's nothing on gaps. I'm not sure. It's just very... I'm puzzled. I'm puzzled by the gap. Anyone who can explain it, Deirdre, if you want to go in and find and explain it, then great. But I couldn't find any explanation. It was a bit weird. But interesting thing. Let's dive in. Okay, these numbers are very small, but the column you want to look at is this one, and the numbers that we're interested in are, oh look, there's some sizable chunks of 100%, staying in the 90s there, and then another 103 here, and then staying in the 90s. And when I say staying in the 90s, I mean like 97, 98, 98, 97, 97, 92, 97, 92, 92, 92. So there's a bit of a drop, but that partly is because there's always a bit of a drop towards the end of the current data. They often get revised back upwards again because of the way the data gets collected. So we're seeing, I mean, we've basically been sat at around 100% for quite a while now of rail ridership, and that's despite the fact we're still running like a 60 to 80% timetable. Government is cutting services, is getting rid of train fleets, and just generally running the system into the ground. Despite all of that, despite the best efforts of government, I will bring my little face in the corner. Hello, it's me in the corner. Hi. But despite the best efforts of government, rail ridership is absolutely solid. It is enormously solid. Quite something. Anyway, let's park that for now. And there will be, it's going to be a news episode next week, so we'll do some news. Before we get to the news episode next week, we need to finish this episode. And in order to do that, we need to talk about the last mile problem and what it is. The last mile problem. What that? And so we're going to explain what it is, or attempt to explain what people think it is. So, let's just get my favorite browser up here. Let's see. Oh, actually, I fluffed the gag because look, we're gonna go in. We're gonna Bing it. We're gonna Bing it and find out what it is. So let's go to Bing here. Google. Enter. There we are. Google. And then we're gonna go last mile problem public transportation. Let's just say public transport and see what happens. Last mile problem, public transport. Let's see what happens. No, go away, Google. Get lost. The last mile problem is the challenge of moving people between transportation hubs and their final destinations. Right? Like the walk from your nearest bus or train station to your place of work. What? But it's not a problem because you walk it or you wheel it Where's the problem element of this? When this distance it creeps over a quarter mile, our willingness to utilise public transport dwindles. We'll get to challenging this momentarily, but yeah. So you can see that. So let's go into. Well, where's an example? Let's just pick a. I mean, firstly, let's go to the Wikipedia and see what the Wikipedia says, shall we? So you know, you've got these various sort of. Well, you've got so yeah, last mile. So it's got like history of last mile. Originally, it was referred to telecommunications and the challenge of getting cabling into homes and businesses off the kind of the main telecommunication network, and the fact that you've got this last mile of cable. But it covers distribution and logistics networks, transportation networks, and as you can see, there's all sorts of nonsense popping up here. So yeah, okay, so some nonsense popping up here in the old Wikipedia. So what about what else can we see? To be honest, if you go through here, there's a load of little articles, there's discussions like all these tech type things. Let's see what else we've got. Oh no, I don't want videos. Actually, if we do go to videos, see it's all like there's planning, transit connectivity, smart growth, smart cities, feasibility studies, solving the problem, shared autonomous vehicles. There's a not just bikes video. There we are. So all sorts of kind of discussion of what it is, but let's actually talk about what materially the issue is. Generally, you can split the last mile, what is discussed as the last mile problem, split into two. So and we're going to talk about both. We'll probably focus on the PT one. Straight out of Martha's episode last week, because it's gorgeous. We've got public transport as one element of the last mile problem, and then we've got logistics, so goods movement, so basically movement of people, movement of things are the two kind of categories of last mile problem. And so the last mile problem manifests itself differently between those two. I mean, the ostensible, I'm using rabbit ears, last mile problem manifests itself theoretically differently between those two things. And in the case of public transport, the logic is that if you have a long distance to get to you're accessing the public transport system, then you're not going to use it. Which that's true. But is that a last? Okay, we'll get to that. So, why don't I? Let's just get straight to it. Why don't I think that the last mile problem exists? Why don't I think the last mile problem exists? So let's go back to our two little ideas. We'll start with public transport. Let's start with public transport. Why don't I think the last mile problem exists for public transport? Well, probably the easiest way to explain why I don't think it exists is by using some examples. Let's start in Paris. There we are, Paris. Straight out of OpenStreetMap, but using the transport level kind of layer select, and it gives you this nice view of rail and buses. And I've used the same zoom level across all of the maps that we're about to put up. Here is a map of basically a map of a public transport system. Essentially, we are looking. There's a weird OpenStreetMap bug here. It's a bit strange. We're looking at an incredibly dense public transport network in the center of a massive city. So it's cheaty to say there is no, there can be no last mile problem, because you can see here there is no last mile problem. But there is, within the land that we can see here, the populated area we can see here, there is no last mile problem. Everyone can access public transport very quickly, very easily. The last mile problem doesn't exist. But, okay, fine. And to be honest, likewise, go to London. The reality is that, for the most part, you can see a few gaps starting to... Actually, you know what? Let's change pen colour, because there's lots of red in here. Let's change our little pen colour. Let's make it purple. There we are. So you can see there's some areas here that maybe aren't so good. Where's Chelsea? Actually, Chelsea's pretty good. It's got decent bus coverage for the most part. Central London, as you can see, pretty much all of central London here is pretty good saturation. Again, there is no last mile problem here. But jump kind of southwest a bit, kind of to the edge of London, towards the suburbs, and you can see that, wait a minute, maybe things aren't quite so rosy, but you can still see the bus service. So here's a more obvious gap. There's a more obvious gap, and here's a more obvious gap. And here's a bit of a more obvious gap at the edge here, although I dare say people, that's about, what is that? A kilometre is about the size of the width of my thumb, so it's about a mile to the edge of Kingswood there to get to the station. For the most part, this suburb, there's possibly a suburb, that's probably not too bad, as long as you can get through this way. There are some possible gaps here that maybe exist. I think the biggest one probably here is between Oxshott and Cobham. So that's a bit of a distance to get kind of to the nearest station. But the thing is, again, it's not the last mile problem it's not an intractable problem that needs, it's not a deep and impossible complex interface to manage. It's just provide enough density of public transport. And to be honest, that's for the most part, for everyone within the M25 and a lot of people who are in the wider London travel to work area, the last mile problem isn't a problem. It's not something people really think about at all. There are plenty of areas where public transport can be improved within and outside the M25, and there are challenges with uptake in certain boroughs for sure. But there is, looking around here, that there's Hog's Cross there perhaps is not doing so well. There are certainly some areas that are not perfect, but it's not an intractable problem. It's just to provide enough public transport. So if we keep going down, so that was London. Here's Sheffield. Sheffield is a pretty dense amount of provision in the centre. If we go back to Paris, it's like on par with Paris in the very centre here. And I think if I got Manchester up, which I haven't, it would be even. I don't know why. I've picked a random load of stuff on that doesn't bear much logic. But sleep deprived. I didn't sleep at all much last night. Actually, that's not true. That's unfair to Dina, who definitely didn't sleep at all last night. I slept some time last night. Anyway, okay, you can start seeing there's some gaps once you start getting up to kind of the rural areas out on the fringes of Sheffield. But by and large, Sheffield's coverage is pretty good. The bus service. The coverage is pretty good. The frequency may not be, and again, that's and refer back to Martha's episode last week where there are challenges with, having a line on a map showing that there is a bus service through here does not necessarily correspond to providing enough saturation to solve the problem, and obviously the lack of integration that we have in public transport in the UK further compounds the challenges. But again, it's not like there's an intractable, impossible to solve gap that means that, as we'll see later on by the sorts of people who do shout about the last mile problem, it's not something that we need fancy technology to solve. It's not something that we need, that there's it's an impossible political kind of crossroads that that means that we can't do anything now and we have to keep cars running everywhere. No, it isn't. If we pop up to Edinburgh, saturated by, this is in level of density, so to go to Edinburgh, it's less dense. But the coverage is still not bad. If we see here, the scale, actually, annoyingly, the scale is, despite the zoom level being the same, the scale is changing, which I don't fully understand why that is, to be honest, in these screenshots, because I just literally dragged the mouse around. Is it because of the geode? Some mapping nerd, tell me the answer to that. Anyway, again, okay, some issues up the other side of Camo, and definitely, there are problems in Edinburgh with bus service density in a few places, but actually I'm struggling to find somewhere that's very obviously a gap. It's pretty good going. Shout out to Leith Dry Docks, where they just made a boat fall over. I did see that. Yeah, it's not bad. It really isn't bad. They're definitely, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. Let's go to, where are we now? Nice. Let's go to Newcastle. And Newcastle has some bigger gaps. So there's a big gap. There's a big gap. There's an enormous gap. You can start seeing where it's like, this isn't a last mile issue. This is a public transport provision issue. So this is you can start seeing that it's like, no. The people who are talking about the last mile problem, what are they trying to get us to not talk about? Because is it just that there's not enough public transport? Because I can tell you, the cost of providing buses in those areas is not much. It's not much at all. What else we got? We've got, here's Borough. Actually, it's the whole of Teesside. You've got Stockton, Thornaby, and Middlesbrough. Again, coverage not bad. Actually, coverage pretty good. Eagles Cliff is maybe not quite as nicely served as it ought to be. But actually, it's not bad. There's pretty decent bus coverage. The buses kind of cover anyone who's played City Skylines, or Sim City or whatever you happen to play. You know that to get the best out of your public transport system, you kind of sometimes end up with a bit of a weavy bus route to capture all the people. Well, yes, that's good. That's fine. When well balanced. Here, Aberdeen, lovely Aberdeen. Kingswells, West Hill. I think there are buses that have not made it into the OpenStreetMap system, because I'm sure there are buses that go out to West Hill. And actually, when I went up to Inverurie, this is because we're out in the rural sticks and they don't do open data up there. Because I went up to Inverurie and there were just no buses around Inverurie. So I think there are buses into these areas. But yeah, but it's coverage within the centre of the city is not bad for little Aberdeen. Not bad at all. I definitely would suggest that OpenStreetMap is missing some mapping data, so feel free to get on it. But anyway, yeah, so there you go. Oh, do continue to ping me in the chat to say hello, by the way. So let's keep going. Where are we going to look at next? York. Here's York, and I can say with reasonable comfort and confidence that Gap, big Gap, yeah, the buses around York are good if you've got them, and not good if you don't have them. Gap. There are quite a few painful gaps. Gap in the bus provision. Again, the problem is not that there's not the last mile problem. Go up to Wart Hill here. There doesn't need to be a last mile problem. You could have a bus that just runs down through Wart Hill, through Holtby, and connects down to you could have a bus interchange at Grimston Bar, or you could just have it come on the Hull Road here. There's not a last mile problem here. It does not exist. Let's go to Aberystwyth. Here we are, and the Wine here has a decent bus through it. You've got actually pretty. The bus through Penparcau is pretty good. The buses around Aberystwyth. Okay, they've wrecked the times, and it's annoying that there's not a bus that goes through Llangorwen. There used to be a Clarach bus, and it doesn't seem to be shown on here at all, so that's a bit annoying. The loop, the Borth Bog loop was always a fun one late at night, because the quickest way for me to get from the last bus, which was, what was it, 10, was it like 10 to 10 or something rubbish? It would do the loop. And bearing in mind that I want to get to where my parents live in Talbot, I would go round Borth, up through, and then down, like through kind of... round the back and through Taliesin and then back to Talbot that way. It'd be a really long bus journey, but kind of you definitely fall asleep in the bus, or you get the bus in the morning and fall asleep and end up in Machynlleth as well. It's the alternative thing. But the point being that the buses do run. Is it the X44 that runs along here? Anyway, the buses are pretty good around Aber. The frequency not so good, but the bus service saturation is not so bad. People are asking what the bus is that goes out to Ponterwyd. That's actually the main. That's like the main X44 or something. It actually goes right the way through to it's like a doing the job of a railway that ain't there anymore. Or actually, in that case, not a railway that isn't there, just doing the job of going along the main road. So that was Aber. For no particular reason, it would jump up to down to Barnstaple and Bideford, and the kind of the Torridge area, River Torridge, River Taw, and this is more rubbish because Roundswell, quite populated area with quite a lot of housing expansion, and the bus services ain't great. Ditto, the back of Bideford is also not great. And again, you start seeing that there are enormous tracts of, like, people do live in these areas, and there's just enormous tracts of nothing. If I were to get to anywhere in here, nothing. I mean, you go to Aberystwyth, and I'm going to be honest with you, nobody lives in this area. Just almost nobody lives in these areas. So at this point, you go, well, the last mile problem for them. How do they? It's like they don't need to. It doesn't. The population density is so low that they can drive and it's fine. Like, we don't want to get absolutely. There's no point in capturing these edge cases, the 95th percentile stuff, because most people live in built-up areas. A tiny fraction of people live in the little wee parts. So nobody lives, like, basically nobody lives in Bontgoch. Cwmsumlog, it's just an abandoned mine. Cwmerfyn, shout out to Kez's fam, but it's fine. They can just have whatever car they like. Like, ideally it'd be a bashed up one, like Peugeot 107, but it can be whatever car it is. Doesn't matter, because in total there are 100 people who live inside that big circle, so it doesn't matter. Yes, I fully agree that the railway should still be running, both from Barnstaple up to Braunton because it's an incredibly popular tourist route, and to be honest, ideally up to Ilfracombe, and ideally they'd have the railway running up to Bideford as well. You can go on, man. At some point, I'll do my rail natter on that because you can cycle all of it and it's fab. It's my favourite kind of railway cycle in the country. It's brilliant. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, there we are. So that's kind of going down to some problem areas. Within this area, more people live in this area and don't have great access to public transport. But again, that's a problem of, there should definitely be a bus route following the B road down from Roundswell towards, that goes down to Torrington. That B road has enough people on it that there should be a bus. There should be a direct bus that goes from Barnstaple to Great Torrington. That's just that there should be. It doesn't need to be super frequent, but it should exist, and it doesn't. There are probably a few thousand people within that circle that I've just done, and they probably ought to have a better public transport provision. Generally, ideally, it would tie into the Tarka line, But anyway, again, though, I would shout that there is no last mile problem here. The problem is one of not providing good public transport. And you don't need to invent a brand new snazzy thing to just introduce bus services. What about logistics, right? So slightly different. Let's talk about logistics. And to do that, I'm going to shove up the DFT's graphic explaining what different types of lorry can run on Britain's roads. Because this is kind of an interesting point. So the last mile problem is, right, you get your big truck and it arrives in town, and how do you get the stuff from the truck into the shop or the house, particularly if you've got, pedestrianised areas. I would say, actually, I'm going to go big face because there have been a few queries. Let's have a look at the chat while we go through this. Oh, crikey, if I click on your faces, it gives me lots more options now. YouTube, you've updated things. Xander, just joined. In case not already been asked, what are my thoughts on on-demand bus shuttles for areas with low population? Mixed. Some people suggest they are good, others suggest they're bad, and I don't have a hard opinion on it. I feel like they're not a bad idea, but they have to provide. If you go back to the Permanence of the Permanent Way episode with Dr. Kevin Tennant, for public transport to work, you have to trust that it's going to be there, and that doesn't necessarily exist for on-demand services. So that's a challenge. That is a challenge that I think potentially they don't necessarily overcome. But there are other ways, technology. And this is a situation where technology can potentially, by showing you where that bus is, if it can show you where that bus is and it's going to divert to get you, that could provide the confidence. But again, that excludes people who don't have access to that kind of technology. So a bit of mixed feelings on it, Xander. But good question. Thank you. The new IKB 4472 is a confusing series of IKB had nothing to do with 44. I mean. Probably would have liked looking at it, but anyway. Put back the Barnstaple to Bideford Railway. Yes, well, we did that, didn't we? I think your comment prompted me to start yammering on about it. Raphael is saying, no transport because of no one living there, or no one living there because of no transport. Well, yeah. But the reality is, I suppose, I don't mind if it means people have moved out of that rural area that's difficult to provide public transport for, and they've moved into a city where it's easy to provide public transport. There's some problems within that, absolutely, but by and large, I think as a society, not by and large, 100% as a society, we are more environmentally friendly and better off culturally and socially if we live in built-up areas and we're rubbing shoulders with other people. Rural people are mental. Let's face it. I was one for a while. It's very good to see other people and be around other people, particularly when we have an aging population. I say this from experience with my grandparents. Loneliness is a serious risk to our population, an aging population. And actually, if more of those old people lived in areas that were more populated, we could provide them the services they need more easily to survive, and also we could kind of look out for each other a bit. I'm a big fan of urban living. I think, and yes, there are different densities of urban living, and Britain's rubbish at density, but I'm quite happy for people to not live in rural areas, other than those who have to live there to work. What other chat? Remember to at me so I can spot your comments. Rat King, I park my van in pedestrianised areas. How is this a problem? But I live in London and hate our local council, so pinch of salt. I don't quite know what your point is, Rat King. You may have to elaborate upon that point. How is the last mile a problem? Well, indeed. Dave, aren't the DFT trialing longer, heavier vehicles in relation to lorries? Hell yes, they are. they're called trains. Use trains. David Shepard. If we can replace Uber with flexible on-demand buses in the sparse areas, that'd be a good thing. Christchurch, I think, was the city in New Zealand where they did an interesting study of Uber, and they said Uber's like, yeah, we can serve all the areas that are in the fringes and don't suffer from and don't benefit from good public transport. And you look at all the Uber traces, and they're just in the centre of the city where the public transport is excellent, extracting public transport value, extracting fair revenue, and getting in the way of the public transport and making it worse for everyone. We're all Gareth. Yeah, no, I was thinking of you. We're all crazy. We're all we're a wild, without using kind of ableist language, we're a wild bunch, us folks who grew up in the countryside. Can I put the map up for Bristol? No, but you can all look it up for yourselves. You know what? I actually can. Let's do that right now. Let's go in. Open street map. Oh my, come on, Bing. Bing. You can't see this right now, can you? Let me put small face back on. There we are. So, OpenStreetMap, the transport map, which is pretty good. And we're going to go down and look at Bristol. Let's get there's the same zoom level. Let's get rid of that. What's this thing? What's this? Why are you using up my real estate? Ugh. That's not bad. Apart from anyone in Abbottsley or Lower Fayland or anyone down in the ridiculously named Chewton Keynsham. And then I bet as soon as you get there's Chipping Sodbury, not too bad actually, but yeah, it starts getting a bit thinner on the ground once you disappear up into the thick of it, right? Dursley, very little going on. Anyway, fine. Bus services, mixed bag depending on where you are in Bristol. There, as you can see. So, I think we've caught up with the mass. Oh, let's not make this a let's go to all the places. Everyone can go and have a look at their different places. Martha Lauren is saying a good demand responsive service might get 3 to 5 boardings per hour. A poor fixed route gets 10 or so. You end up finding an hourly fixed route serves people better. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that, Martha. I have to say, I am inclined, because then you can start building that infrastructure, the physical, visible infrastructure, like a nice bus shelter with a thing saying the next bus is going to be here. Yeah, I'm inclined. I err towards that side, although I'm not 100% dissuaded of the potential value of an on-demand system. So let me go back to let's talk about logistics. So let's go here. Talk about logistics. We have a challenge. So in order to talk about why I don't think the last mile problem exists for logistics, let's talk about what I think logistics should look like. Very briefly, this is an episode in and of itself, so I'm going to be really quick on this one. But here we have all the vehicles that are allowed to drive on the roads and carry stuff around in the UK. And we have light goods vehicles at the top. These can be easily electrified. There we are. That's an awful little... There we are. We can electrify these. There's a bzzz at the top there. We can electrify those. So those are 2-axle vehicles. And likewise, so lorries or heavy goods vehicles, we've got other 2-axle vehicles, so like up to 18 tons. So these two here, these ones here, those also can be electrified. Bzzz, nice and easy. You can electrify those, and they can just be battery vehicles. Fine. So that's quite straightforward. Yeah, so fine, good stuff. We start having problems for this range of vehicles up to 40 tons. These are... It's possible, but a bit of a way off that we can electrify these. So plan is that we should aim to electrify them like this. There we are, there's my little but trickier. So that's 3-axle rigid, 4-axle rigid, 4-axle articulated, drawbar vehicles up to 40 tons. Anything below 40 tons, it's possible to, my understanding is that it's possible to electrify these types of vehicles, but it's trickier. And there's another thing at play as well, which is the safety of heavy goods vehicles in and around towns, the emissions from tyres as well as exhaust pipes, because don't forget, electric vehicles they just solve tailpipe emissions. They don't solve anything else, and in some situations they make things worse because these vehicles will get heavier because of all the batteries. So the reality is the amount of payload you'll be able to carry in these. The reason I made these problematic, so these ones here, the reason they're problematic is because the amount of payload you can actually carry in these will reduce because they'll have a lot more battery. So at this point, I would say everything from up to 18 tons, so kind of the stuff that's going upwards. So basically these things, my scribbling is bad. These, which can all be electrified. There we are. There's our electrification. We can electrify those. Those can be in town. I'm happy for those to be in towns. That's okay. We can manage vehicles up to that size within the size of towns. So the last mile problem isn't a problem because you've got these. Plus another little thing that's not included on here, which is it's a bicycle. It's a bicycle. You can use a bicycle to get around. So bicycles can with a trailer. Or maybe it's like a weird one of these things that's got like this sort of thing up here, and it's got like a little doodad here. Cargo bikes. The bicycles, as we'll point out momentarily, bicycles are also good. So in town, where the last mile problem is an issue, it isn't an issue. That's solvable. In terms of the other logistics, these ones, the ones that are up to 40 tons, you have to... So keeping below 40 tons, fine. You carry less around. You can probably electrify those. Fine. Okay, so you can electrify them. But everything above 40 tons, you cannot electrify this. It just is not possible to battery electrify these. They are too heavy. Hydrogen does not work because you need too large a hydrogen store to make them any use whatsoever. Putting overhead wires above the motorway, as previously discussed in a previous episode, is stupid. Putting batteries in these will not work. You cannot get enough battery charge to have any payload behind your vehicle, and the batteries will run out immediately. So all those 40-ton trucks, which, by the way, wreck the roads already, we cannot make our vehicles heavier because all of the bridges across the UK will fall down, and the government is absolutely not willing to pay for it. So no, I do not believe that hydrogen is going to work for HGVs. It's not going to work. It won't work. You have to carry too much hydrogen around for it to be practicable. As soon as you have to stop the vehicle regularly to top it up with hydrogen, or you have to stop the vehicle to charge it up, the benefits of using these versus, I don't know, trains absolutely disappears. So use trains. So instead of in towns, the last mile issue is fine because you've got these little nubbins. Everything else, you can use intermodal, you can use all sorts of other freight trains. I would argue in the UK that their routes, for example, if you reinstated a Northern Transpennine mainline, as I've previously mooted, you would reinstate that as with a gauge that you could use for Ro-Ro. So rather than wasting money on dueling the A66, you can use, not Ro-Ro, sorry, piggyback. You can use some piggyback trains. So we could have piggyback running. And you just basically do a park and ride and you have piggyback. I think that's something that could be explored on certain key corridors. Likewise, I think you could and should do that on other Transpennine routes like the M62 corridor or the Manchester-Sheffield corridor. You could look at instead using the Hope Valley and expanding those tunnels and using piggyback and having kind of end-to-end, a bit like Channel Tunnel service. You essentially kind of use it a bit like Channel Tunnel service, except that it's not the shuttle, it's this. And by the time you do this and you study this, you might realise that actually the logistics are better, that you just carry the whole thing on the train, and then you can just rely on the small things. You can just have the train arrive into the city and use the 18-ton or smaller vehicles. And so you could then basically say, multi-axle lorries, we aim to get rid of them. This is a massive logistical feat, do not get me wrong. This would be an enormous undertaking to completely change Britain's supply chain so that it could work this way, but that change is going to be forced upon us by the government, because the government said that they're not going to be selling new ICE vehicles after 2030, so this is all going to happen. Well, it's not. Government will just they'll just not achieve its law. It'll just break its own law. But that's what's obviously going to happen. But battery and hydrogen ain't going to work for those 40-ton plus vehicles. So the way that logistics works across the UK is going to fall flat on its face. Isn't it a good job we've wasted so much land building enormous 44-ton truck logistics centres? Isn't that wonderful? What a very good use of huge amounts of land. Anyway, so and of course the hero of the piece is if for the last mile problem. We've had posties for a very long time, and they've walked, they've biked, they've used vans. These are all eminently achievable with current technology. We've had electric bicycles for 100 years. No, this is not a problem. It's not a last mile problem. This is another easy one, not a last mile problem. So, to my mind, they're just not. Both of these, the public transport and logistics, the last mile problem does not function and exist for these. It just does not. So, if it doesn't exist, or certainly if I don't think it exists, if it doesn't exist, why do people say that it does exist? Why do people say that the last mile problem does exist? Why do they do this? Why indeed? So let me do a bit more question answering. I'm going to go big face. Hello everyone. Sorry if this is a bit janky. I've not done one of these for a while. Can we create a last mile problem for motorists? Yeah, ideally, yeah. Each of those green lines in the lorry section is just batteries. They're just batteries. Yes, exactly, Tom. Al Store, Scania have an articulated truck with 40-ton GTW and 350-kilometer range with hydrogen. Wait, GTW, gas turbine? Gross tonnage weight. Oh yeah, so the actual loadable tonnage is 40 tons, 350-kilometer range. Yeah. Also, Pete Jones is pointing out the road damage, the fourth power rule. Michael C. going, does the rail network have the capacity to carry effectively all HGV traffic? Absolutely, it does not, no. But this is why I have we need to increase rail capacity by 50 to 100% by the middle of this century line that I use all the time. All of our ports should be electrified as the TDNS wanted, absolutely. Let's see. What else are people saying? Check Eiffel Tower intermodal station in Köln in Deutschland, in Germany. Yes. Gregor McCabery, at the moment, biogas is gaining traction in HGVs, but rail needs to take an increasing role. The thing is, biogas again, it's like these are all kind of euphemistic keep burning things logics. So, yeah. Yes, last mile problem for motorists sounds like a park and ride to me. Well, yeah, quite. No, James Walker lives in Great Torrington and works in Barnstable. The bus service is now. Oh, there is a bus service now. James, you leaving us on tenterhooks. What is the bus service doing, James? Is it that you go via Bideford, though? Where in Great Torrington? I mean, you don't have to say where in Great Torrington. Do you live at the bottom of the hill or the top of the hill? That's the key question. You'd at Puffin Billy River level or the top of the hill, burning down wooden town places, made up wooden fictional towns level. Always used to have a Hawkins ice cream, and actually most of my Hawkins ice creams have been consumed in Bideford's Park, but that's another story. Anyway, I digress. Why do people say the last mile problem does exist? Well, two reasons. Reason number one, this should have been a ping. I missed a ping opportunity there. Ping! Number one, because people want to sell you something pointless or bad. That's reason number one. Reason number two, because people want you to do nothing. So I've actually weirdly not written these right, because I'm not actually answering the question. I should have said, why do people say that? And then the people, so really what I should have done is, and I'm going to do it now, because they want to sell you something, because they want to do nothing. There we are. Marvellous. There we are. On the fly editing. Number one, because they want to sell you something pointless or bad. Number two, because they want to do nothing. These are the two reasons why the last mile problem gets talked about a lot. And I'm not saying that everyone who talks about the last mile problem has an ulterior motive. Quite often it's kind of a thing that well-meaning consultants or people working for big transport companies kind of talk about and they get worried about it. They ought not to, really. Oh yeah, that's right. So you have to ignore the fact that, you know what? No, stuff it. I'm unwilling to do it. I'm doing this. Let's copy paste this to this and fix the problem. There we go. Look at this. Editing on the fly because I am bad at podcasting. There we are. Yes. Number one, because they want to sell you something pointless bad. Here's an example of a pointless or bad thing. It's a stupid pod. It's an autonomous pod. By which I mean it goes when it's in a car park, it drives itself a bit like one of those robots we had in primary school, and then someone underpaid then drives it everywhere else. Here it is, probably in Milton Keynes, I'm guessing. Greenwich Automated Transport. It's just made up. It's nonsense. This is nonsense. It's a stupid thing. Horrible. Just pointless. It's a car. This is, for anyone who didn't realise, this is a car. It's a car. It's a car, folks. It's just a car. And we don't want cars. The whole point is that we don't want cars, and this is a car. So yeah, it's something pointless, and often it's like it's coming up with some other like this constant discussion. I'm on various panels and boards of things, and there's often discussions from very senior people who should know better, going, this is going to be a real challenge for the railways, or in the future our railways might dock with autonomous pods. No, they won't ever do that. What is that? You talk about a car crashing into a train? You remember that video of the level crossing with a Range Rover hitting a train? It's not good. The autonomous pods are not going to dock with trains. We're not going to rebuild all our stations. No, people are going to arrive on a bike, they're going to walk, they're going to get a bus, they're going to get a taxi, they're going to walk into the station, and they're going to be doing that for the next 200 years. That's good, that's positive. So we don't want this junk. This is just a car. The other thing, of course, is so that's people who want to. I didn't update this, did I? Anyway, it's people who want to do nothing, and that's not useful, is it? Wait a minute. Let me fix this. It's bad, isn't it? It's fine. You all know what's going on. And then copy that and then put it here. Yes, good, fine. Spoiler there. Yeah, so why do people say the last mile problem exists? Well, number one is because they want to sell something pointless or bad. Number two is because they want to do nothing. And here's a man who wanted to do nothing. Mayor James Palmer, ex-mayor of the Cambridge and Peterboroughshire Combined Authority. I can't exactly remember what they're called. Anyway, they don't want to do anything. People who say, the last mile, it's a real challenge, which means public transport can't work here because of the last mile problem. Or, we can't really do this public transport thing because we need to solve the last mile problem first. Challenge these people. Throw eggs at them. Generally just humiliate them out of town because it's a tool to stop the good thing happening. And here is a man who knows all about tools. Yes, there we are. Anyway, so ex-mayor James Palmer is a good example of this sort of person. You propose nonsense that sounds great, is an enormous vanity project because ultimately you don't want to do anything. You want to delay good stuff happening, like more buses, making cars disappear, and also building trams. So those are the real challenges. He is one of the real challenges, but this is why the last mile problem is a thing. Or is it? Do you have alternative thoughts? Do you have alternative thoughts? I don't know, maybe you do. We have 10 minutes for you to have your alternative thoughts. Go on, tell me things. I'll go big face while we chuck questions at me. Campaign for North East Rail. What about cargo trams? Are they a gadget ban? No, the cargo tram's not a gadget ban. It's just not necessarily that functional. Some of them exist. They exist in a few places. One of them existed in Germany that fed the VW plant, didn't it? I don't think it does anymore. I think that ended. Point one is they want to sell you a gadget ban or a techie thing. They want like mobility as a service, and they go, mobility as a service. No, that's not a thing. It's just called integrated transport, and Martha and I talked about it last week. You don't need the snazzy fancy thing. You just need to make the physical public transport service work. Taxi or minibus, if not macrobus. No, it's just a car. You could call it a taxi, but ultimately it's like no, it's not as good as a taxi because a taxi actually knows where it's going and can and the driver's in it. You can have a chat with them. That's fine. It's a paid member of it's a paid worker driving a taxi, enjoying their job, passionate about their job, potentially with dubious political background, but quite often not. I always enjoy having a chat with taxi drivers. Ryan Hogg, lack of integration between modes is a big issue. 100%. See last week's episode. But again, that's not a last mile problem issue. That's just bad. That's just public transport integration not being good. Michael C. reckons that the last mile problem does exist, but is easily solvable by making public transport better. Yeah, but that's my point. You see, it doesn't exist. It's just there's not a last mile problem. It's just that there's an area that's not served by public transport properly. Deirdre is saying in Bristol the last mile issue has been help. Oh, YouTube. Deirdre will finish the message momentarily. Has anyone ever caught a taxi and not spoken with the driver? A taxi is also still a car. It is. But I think that taxis have a valid place. I'm not an entire taxi hater. Taxis have a valid place. I use taxis. Sometimes it's like, I need to get to the station quickly. When I was in Milton Keynes, I was like, I'm not faffing for a bus because I want to make sure I get the train, get my change of train so I can come back here and see my wee one and Dina as quickly as possible. Yes, Deirdre, a very good point. Horrible scooters, and absolutely that's helped in York. I use them all the time. Horrible e-scooters are a good way to fill in some of those gaps. But I would, again, argue that public transport probably should be filling those gaps rather than e-scooters, because lots and lots of e-scooters is not as environmentally friendly as one bus. But those e-scooters, likewise the Boris bikes, much as I hate to call them that, the hireable bikes in London, the TfL bikes are brilliant. Hireable bike and scooter schemes, I think, are fantastic. I don't think it's a last mile problem. Again, I would consider that to be a form of micro-mobility, which is some people find a gimmick word. But yes, bikes, walking, I would count those e-bikes and things as just like hireable active travel, active transport, active travel as it's often gimmickly called. But walking, cycling, wheeling, these are good things. We want to facilitate them, which is why we don't want to shove junk in pavements. Daniel Smith, we got rid of the capability for point-to-point small loads to go via rail when we closed all the marshalling yards and only ran block trains. Yeah, there was a reason for that, though, because it was an inefficient way to move stuff, and we didn't have the technology to make that move efficient again. That could change. Now that we have easy ways to tag, we have Amazon-level logistics, we could potentially start reinstating some of those complex logistical systems, because that's the sort of thing that can be automated in a big complex warehouse that just packs a load of intermodal wagons, sends them on their way, and brings them back and unpacks them entirely, automated. That's potentially a thing, public e-scooters and hireable bikes as a public utility should be way more common. Absolutely. They are. You're right. They are. They are indeed Ken Livingston bikes, not Bojo bikes. Anyway, right, enough of that. I'm going to get rid of my face, and I'm going to tell you all about what's coming up next week. But first, I must say, everyone who's listened to this in audio only, it's going to be under an hour. Absolutely it is. Everyone who's listened to this in audio only format, thank you for doing so. This one should be up. Hopefully soon. It might not be as instantaneous as the others, because all the others were set up in advance. This one, not so much. But yeah, all good podcasting platforms. Please, if you are listening, if everyone who's in the chat, please spread the word. If you do this, please rate the podcast and leave a review, because it will help more people listen to it. And I want more people to listen to it. Mission this year is get more people listening to and watching the pod. We want that to happen. Hence why the Twitter account has been set up, to make people realise that it's a thing. It exists as a podcast. It's been around for blinking years now. So please encourage people to do that. And if you are a regular listener, please write reviews, whatever the things are that your podcasting platform allows you to do, please do that. Spotify allows you to do ratings. Please rate me as you wish to. Don't rate me as a 1 if you... I mean, you know what? If you want to, you can. But I'd prefer it if you enjoy it to rate as a 5, because 5 is generally considered good. Anyway, waffle. Patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for the Patreon. Subscribe, support this happening. Thank you everyone for doing that. Your names have been updated in the end credits. You get extra little bonuses. You get little behind the scenes peeks and of life, the universe, and everything. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis to throw loose change at me, and GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord to continue this chat ad infinitum with about 1,000 other people continuing. It's a lovely community. You're all lovely. Moderators have a very easy time in there because you're all great. The bingo exists, doesn't it? I should put a bingo thing on here. And merch is coming back soon. I just need some time to, a moment to sit and do that, and I don't have those at the moment. So the merch will be, but get your suggestions for merchandise into the Discord. Start a thread in the general chat if you like of suggestions for merchandise. I'm going to get the Not a Metro sorter on a t-shirt. I think that's a fun thing to do. Get the Not a Metro sorter on a t-shirt. That's going to be one of the first things. And get the mugs back. The Abolish the Treasury mug. A few things like that. But get your suggestions in. Next week, episode 159, trains built in Derby, by the way, the Class 159. Why Britain's railway headquarters won't be in Derby. They've just been announced as being in Derby, so I'm going to explain why they're not going to be in Derby. That feels like a fun episode. It's a news episode, but we will talk quite a bit about Derby. Should be fun. That's that. That's next week. That's a chance for me to make my enlarged face appear again. And to say, everyone in the chat, everyone in watching after the fact as well, hello to you. I will see you all next week for another live episode. I'm going to have some water, I'm going to eat some food, and I'm going to give the wee one a little, not a little, I'm going to give her an enormous cuddle, unless she's asleep, in which case I will not be bothering her. Anyway, right, cheerio! Cheerio!